that brings us to a point that we actually haven't brought up at all, and that is you're part of the Women of Faith team.
Yes.
And can you explain a little bit about that and what you do so other people can understand that you do, that you're available to talk with them, certainly at the conferences and whatnot? Can you tell us a little bit about the Women of Faith?
Sure. It was something that I would never in a million years have seen myself being part of. When I used to think of women's ministry, I thought of women in nice dresses who had their act together, telling other women how to get their act together. And in fact, before I spoke at Women of Faith, I had only spoken in public once before. Most people don't know that. They assume that I've been doing that for years. But before that, I had worked in Christian television. I had worked as a contemporary Christian artist, but I'd never been a speaker. But a friend of mine asked me one day if I would do her a favor, and I said, sure. And she said, well, I'd like you to go to speak at a luncheon, at a women's luncheon in Palm Springs at a country club. And I said, Marlene, I would rather stick my hand in a blender. I'm not doing that. And I said to her, you know so many people who are speakers. Why don't you ask one of them? And she said, okay, here's the deal. I've asked everybody. You're the bottom of the barrel. So I said,
gosh, thanks.
Yeah, I said, you know what? Okay, as your friend and as the bottom of the barrel, I will go do this. But you need to make it clear to the people that that's who's coming. This is all you could get. And I remember waking up that morning thinking, why on earth did I say I would do this? Mm-hmm. And driving to this country club and watching as all these women were having their cars valet parked and perfect little Chanel suits and perfect makeup and faces that didn't move, but they just looked beautiful. And I stood up in front of them, and I remember simply saying to the Lord, Lord, what do I do? And hearing in my spirit him say, tell the truth. Yeah. And so I said to them, 8 weeks ago I was released as a patient from a psychiatric hospital.
Well, that got their attention.
And that's a great opening line, should anyone ever wish to borrow it. You're quite welcome.
No, thanks.
Yeah. And it was and then I started to tell them my story. And I suddenly, halfway through the luncheon, became aware of the fact that there was tears flowing through perfect makeup. And I thought, wow, I guess you can't Botox pain. Uh-huh. And I honestly thought I was...
Well said. Hold on. Say that again. That was a beautiful, beautiful expression.
Well, as I looked at these women with tears flowing through their perfect makeup, I thought, well, I guess you can't Botox pain.
What a wonderful statement. It's true.
And I thought, and what blew me away was when I finished, I said to them, you know what, I'm not in a big hurry, so if anybody wants to talk, I'm here. And I simply sat down on the side of the stage, and one after one after one, these women came and told me their stories of addiction to pain medication, to alcohol, affairs, abuse, abortion. It blew me away. And as I drove back home that day, I said to the Lord, you knew that was going to happen, didn't you? And then not long after that, I was invited to join the Women of Faith team. And by that point, I had begun to grasp the fact that God uses our brokenness as a bridge to other people far more than our pretend wholeness.
That is so true.
And so for the last 14 years, I've been part of this team where for 30 weekends a year, we travel around the country and we simply tell our stories and make it very clear that we are not the good news, Jesus is. Mm-hmm. And then hang around and invite other women to come and tell their stories to us, sometimes for the very first time.
It's just an amazing program for people to hear and be inspired by and to spread the message to everyone. And to have the bonding of the women in that conference center is just an amazing experience.
It is.
Back to Angel Song, how long did it take you and Catherine to complete Angel Song, from the genesis of the idea to the completion of the book?
I think it took us about 9 months to complete the process. From when we first started to talk and when Catherine first said, well, you know, what elements are really key to you? And we began to talk about those things. And I would say from that point until we handed in the finished manuscript, a couple of weeks ago, would be about 9 months.
That's incredible. That's a very short period of time for co-writing from great distances with an awful lot of things going on in between.
There's something about, don't you think that there's something about a busy schedule
yes.
that propels you to get things done? somebody, I don't know who it was, but somebody said, if you want something done, ask the person who's busy to do it.
That's the truth.
And, there's something about that I have to be very intentional about my day. That I have to schedule and think, okay, we need to do this. So I set myself little deadlines, and my faithful little iPhone gives me all these warnings, these little alerts. And I think that there is something about the fact that Catherine has a busy life, and she had other issues going on with her family that took a lot of her time, that just caused us to be very intentional about spending time on this.
That makes sense. Now, who was the character in the book that spoke most to your heart?
Oh, what a great question. Gosh, I think the character who I am very aware of is the one who's actually not in the book very much. I have a tremendous affinity for Anne's sister who doesn't make it out of the car crash. Because there's something about what Sarah says that, and I don't want to give it away, but Sarah's last words, Anne misunderstands. She thinks that she's really crying out to her sister for help, and what she's asking for is far, far more than that. And it really becomes, the whole book could be unpacked in that one prayer request. And there's something about Sarah that I have tremendous love for. I love the fact that she reminds me a little bit of Tabitha in the New Testament, that it was only when she's gone that you start to realize how much she had impacted people, and the void that she had left in people's lives, which is why, they send for Peter and say, come, you have to, she's dead, we can't live without her. Here's all the things she did for us. And I think you see the imprint that Sarah has had on the lives of her neighbor, of other friends, of the community, of Ethan, and ultimately on her sister, because she was just one of those people who believed that even though life is hard, God is good. And if you have one breath left in your body, the best way to use that would be to pray, to ask God for something very specific, which she does. And I think when we're writing them, I think of them as real people, and I have.
They felt like real people.
Yeah, for my thing, it was like, you know what, Sarah, I can't wait till Anne gets home and tells you everything that happened because of that one little prayer.
Now, what was the most interesting tidbit that you learned while writing Angel Song?
When we came to the place where Anne has absolutely had it with feeling like she's hearing voices, she can hear music, keeps talking about angels, she's just Ethan's, she's finding she has feelings for Ethan, but then discovers that because she's not a believer, he's pulling back, which she's very offended by, which she's decided she's had enough with everybody and wants to get back to New York. And then suddenly her car won't start, and flights don't fall into place. And I started to think about, I wonder how many times in life God has interrupted my schedule to protect me from something that I didn't know was ahead. And that little idea of let's make it so that Anne wants to get back to New York. She's decided what's in Charleston is not for me. And what's in New York might be a little dangerous, but you know what? That is my future. And a lot of people are counting on me, so that's where I'm going. But the lengths that God would go to protect her from her own decision, that is a very foolish one. And it made me think of how many times has that happened in my own life. And I thought back to the things I've read in Scripture about Mary and Martha. And, the two stories we know really well are Mary and Martha and Lazarus being brought back from the dead after he's been dead for 4 days. That's a huge miracle. But the other story, which is the one where Martha tends to get the bad rap when she's cross with Mary, because when Jesus and the disciples show up a little early and they're not ready, Mary drops to her feet and listens. But there's such a lesson in that to me, because I'm sure Mary was helping up until Christ arrived, but the minute he interrupted their day, she dropped everything and dropped to his feet and listened. And it made me think, Lord, when you interrupt our schedule, when something doesn't work, when our flight's late, or we get a flat tire, or a car won't start, Lord, help me to see beyond and through the frustration, to stop for long enough to say, Lord, are you trying to speak to me here? Is there something in this moment that I need to receive? Because obviously, God knows what's around the corner, and I don't. And are you giving me a moment of grace just to be very aware of your presence right now, because you know what's ahead?
I want to thank you so much, Sheila, for taking the time out with us today and our CBD audience to give us the insights to Angel Song. It has been a tremendous pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.